She said, "I want freedom, but remain single, I might reconsider." So I disappeared entirely. Now she's desperate because her fallback evaporated. I thought I knew Madison after 4 years together, but apparently I'd been dating a stranger who was just waiting for the right opportunity to reveal her true priorities. We'd built what I believed was a solid foundation. I'm a 28-year-old financial planner at a mid-tier investment firm here in Phoenix. Nothing flashy but stable with a decent salary and clear advancement path, and Madison worked as an event coordinator for corporate retreats, the kind of practical job that paid the bills while she figured out her bigger career goals. Our life together revolved around shared goals that felt real and meaningful, saving systematically for a house down payment, planning weekend trips to Sedona where we'd hike the Red Rocks and talk about our future over picnic lunches I'd pack, discussing potential names for the kids we'd have someday during Sunday brunches at our favorite local cafe where the owner knew our usual orders by heart. I genuinely thought we were on the same page about building something lasting together, the kind of relationship where you both show up every day and choose each other consistently, working toward concrete milestones like homeownership and marriage. Madison seemed to appreciate my planning nature, how I researched the best hiking trails for our weekend adventures, how I'd already calculated exactly how much we needed to save monthly to afford the neighborhood we'd picked out, how I kept spreadsheets tracking our shared financial goals and celebrated every small victory along the way. She used to laugh at my organizational systems but in an affectionate way, calling me her sexy accountant when I'd show her our growing savings balance or present her with a perfectly planned itinerary for our trips. Everything shifted dramatically when Madison landed a position at Apex Events, this elite company specializing in luxury weddings and high-profile galas for Phoenix's wealthy elite, the kind of events where a single floral arrangement costs more than most people spend on groceries in a month, where clients think nothing of dropping $50,000 on a party that lasts 4 hours. Within 3 weeks of starting there, her entire persona transformed from the practical, grounded woman I'd fallen in love with to someone completely obsessed with designer everything and social media aesthetics, suddenly caring intensely about things that had never mattered to her before. She started criticizing our mundane lifestyle with increasing frequency, rolling her eyes when I suggested we cook dinner at home instead of going to expensive restaurants, and began following dozens of lifestyle influencers who preached about limiting beliefs and settling for mediocrity in their perfectly curated Instagram stories. I watched the woman who used to get excited about finding a great deal at Target, who would text me photos of clearance items she thought I'd like, suddenly complain that our furniture wasn't Instagram-worthy, and that my reliable Toyota Camry was embarrassing compared to the luxury vehicles her new colleagues drove to work. The Madison I'd known for 4 years, who appreciated thoughtful gestures like surprise coffee deliveries during her stressful workdays and quiet evenings together reading on the couch, had been replaced by someone who seemed genuinely ashamed of the life we'd built together and was constantly measuring everything against some impossible social media standard that changed daily based on whatever influencer she was following. I tried to be understanding, thinking maybe this was just adjustment stress from her demanding new job in a high-pressure environment, but her transformation felt like watching someone I loved disappear right in front of me and being replaced by a stranger who viewed our entire relationship as somehow beneath her newfound aspirations and professional environment. Madison's new boss, Cameron Sterling, was a 36-year-old divorced entrepreneur who owned multiple event companies across the Southwest and drove a Porsche 911 to client meetings like some kind of walking advertisement for success and masculine achievement. Madison became completely obsessed with his business philosophy about successful people never limiting their options, and started parroting his views about traditional relationships being growth-limiting and restricting personal evolution, delivering these concepts with the fervor of someone who discovered a revolutionary truth rather than just absorbed someone else's self-serving philosophy. I started hearing these phrases constantly at dinner, during our morning coffee routine, even during casual conversations about weekend plans, always delivered with the kind of conviction that suggested she'd found some profound wisdom rather than simply internalized the talking points of a man who clearly had his own agenda. She'd come home from work talking endlessly about Cameron's latest insights about life and success, how he'd built his empire by never settling and always staying open to better opportunities, and I began to realize she wasn't just admiring his business acumen but was actively comparing our relationship unfavorably to his supposed wisdom about keeping options open and never committing fully to anything or anyone. The conversation started feeling like subtle interrogations about my own ambitions and future plans, with Madison asking pointed questions about whether I was truly living up to my potential or just coasting in my comfort zone, language that was clearly borrowed from her daily conversations with Cameron. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in November when she sat me down with the kind of serious, almost rehearsed expression that immediately made my stomach drop, and delivered what was clearly a prepared speech about wanting freedom to explore connections, while keeping me as her anchor. Her exact words that still make my skin crawl when I remember them. She explained with practiced calm and therapeutic language that she needed space to discover who she really was and explore her full potential without the constraints of traditional relationship expectations, but wanted me to remain single and available because she might reconsider our future after her exploration phase was complete and she'd gained the clarity she needed. The sheer audacity of asking me to put my entire life on hold while she shopped around for something better was breathtaking. But what destroyed me completely was discovering that this wasn't a spontaneous decision born from confusion, career stress, or some genuine spiritual crisis. That same night, while she was in the shower washing off what I now realize was probably Cameron's cologne, I saw her phone light up with a text from him, and curiosity combined with growing suspicion got the better of my usual respect for privacy. What I found were months of secret conversations that revealed the calculated, manipulative nature of her entire transformation and the systematic way she'd been planning my emotional destruction. She'd been complaining to him about feeling trapped in suburban mediocrity with someone who lacks vision and ambition, describing me as safe but uninspiring compared to his dynamic entrepreneurial mindset and willingness to take risks. The messages showed detailed discussions about her plan to maintain her safety net while exploring more aligned connections, with Cameron encouraging her to keep me as backup while she figured out what she really wanted from life and relationships. She had been planning this exploration for weeks while pretending everything was normal between us, cooking dinner and discussing vacation plans while secretly strategizing about how to keep me available as her fallback option while she tested the waters with her boss and whoever else caught her fancy in her new social circle. Reading those conversations felt like discovering that someone had been secretly recording our most intimate moments and broadcasting them for entertainment, except infinitely worse because it revealed how little genuine respect she actually had for me and our 4 years of shared experiences, dreams, and plans. Instead of playing the waiting game Madison expected, I executed a total digital disappearance that would have impressed a witness protection program, systematically erasing her access to my life and emotional state with the kind of methodical precision I usually reserved for financial planning and risk assessment. I blocked Madison on every single platform imaginable: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, Pinterest, even Venmo, where she'd been regularly requesting money for networking lunches and professional development events that I now realized were actually dates with Cameron disguised as career advancement opportunities. I changed all my social media accounts to completely private, removed every trace of our relationship history from my profiles, deleted hundreds of photos of us together from trips to Sedona and date nights around Phoenix, and even went through years of old posts to methodically remove any comments or tags that referenced her existence in my life. I blocked her phone number, her work email, her personal Gmail account, and even preemptively blocked her sister's number and her best friend Ashley's contact information because I knew Madison would try to reach me through family members and mutual friends when she realized I wasn't responding to her direct attempts at contact. I changed my gym membership from the upscale fitness center we'd shared near Scottsdale to a basic 24-hour fitness location across town, switched to a new coffee shop for my morning routine instead of the trendy place where we'd spent countless Saturday mornings, and essentially altered every predictable pattern in my life so she couldn't accidentally run into me or stage those supposedly coincidental encounters that manipulative people love to orchestrate. The most satisfying part was realizing that for someone who lived for social media validation and constant digital connection, who posted Instagram stories multiple times daily and thrived on likes and comments, I had essentially made myself completely invisible and unreachable, which would drive her absolutely insane since she thrived on drama, emotional reactions, and the ability to monitor and control other people's responses to her behavior. Madison's panic began within 8 hours of my disappearance when she realized she couldn't track my reaction to her freedom announcement or monitor whether I was falling apart without her, which had clearly been part of her psychological plan to maintain control and keep me emotionally invested while she explored other options. She called my office first thing the next morning claiming there was a family emergency and she desperately needed to reach me about something urgent, but my assistant Jennifer, who had never particularly liked Madison's entitled attitude during her occasional office visits and demanding phone calls, took great satisfaction in informing her that I was unavailable and wouldn't be taking any personal calls during business hours. She created multiple fake Instagram accounts using variations of her friends' names and random combinations of letters to check my stories and posts, desperately trying to gauge my emotional state and see if I was posting anything about our breakup, but found absolutely nothing since I'd gone completely dark and stopped posting anything personal or revealing about my daily activities. She messaged several of my colleagues on LinkedIn with increasingly transparent excuses about needing to discuss mutual friends and catching up about old times, but I'd already given them all a heads up that my ex might try to contact them and asked them to ignore any outreach or requests for information about my whereabouts and emotional state. The desperation escalated dramatically when she showed up at my apartment building at 7 p.m. on a Thursday, wearing the dress I'd always complimented her in and claiming to the doorman that she'd lost her key and needed to get upstairs to retrieve some essential belongings she'd forgotten during her dramatic exit. But I'd already informed building security that she was no longer authorized to enter and should be politely but firmly turned away if she appeared. While Madison was discovering that Cameron had immediately moved on to pursuing a wealthy client's daughter named Sophia who came from Old Phoenix money and could actually fund his lifestyle ambitions without requiring emotional manipulation or elaborate schemes, I was getting premium entertainment through workplace gossip channels and mutual connections that proved more reliable and dramatic than any soap opera I'd ever watched. Cameron had apparently used Madison's emotional investment and desperate need for his approval to secure several high-profile contracts through her increasingly frantic efforts to impress him and prove her worth as both a professional asset and potential romantic partner worthy of his attention and commitment. She'd been working unpaid overtime that stretched well past midnight, taking on additional responsibilities far beyond her job description and salary grade, and even using her own credit cards to upgrade client presentations and venue decorations when the company budget ran short, all while Cameron dangled the possibility of a deeper relationship like a carrot in front of a very eager horse who was willing to run any distance for the promise of eventual reward. The office rumors, which I received through my friend Derek who worked in the same building and had become fascinated by the unfolding drama, revealed that Cameron had never had any real intention of leaving his comfortable bachelor lifestyle for someone he viewed as just another disposable employee with a convenient crush and useful skills he could exploit. He'd been simultaneously pursuing at least 3 other women, including his wealthy ex-wife Sarah, whom he'd been trying to reconcile with for months, using his supposed success with younger, more attractive women as leverage to make her jealous and prove his desirability in the dating market. Madison's public meltdown at Apex events became the stuff of workplace legend that people would reference for years afterward, when she confronted Cameron about their future plans and the promises he'd made about building something together, in front of the entire staff during a crucial client presentation for a $1 million wedding contract that represented the company's biggest potential commission of the year. According to Derek's detailed second-hand account from multiple witnesses, she literally interrupted Cameron's carefully rehearsed pitch to the bride's wealthy family to demand immediate clarification about their relationship status, asking him directly in front of everyone whether their deep connection and shared vision for the future meant anything real to him or if he was just using her for her creative ideas and unpaid labor. The prospective clients were horrified by the unprofessional display of personal drama during what should have been a business meeting. The bride's mother actually stood up and walked out during Madison's increasingly loud and emotional breakdown, and Cameron lost the massive contract immediately while having to physically escort a sobbing, hysterical Madison from the conference room in front of his entire team and the mortified client's family. Her work performance plummeted catastrophically after that incident as she became completely consumed with tracking down my whereabouts and emotional state through increasingly desperate means while simultaneously trying to win back Cameron's attention and salvage her professional reputation after the very public humiliation that had made her a laughingstock in Phoenix's tight-knit event planning community. She started making increasingly unhinged attempts to contact Cameron outside of work hours, showing up at his expensive apartment complex at all hours of the day and night, calling his personal phone dozens of times daily, and even creating multiple fake social media accounts to monitor his activities and interactions with other women. Behavior that everyone in the office recognized as textbook stalking but felt powerless to address directly without getting involved in personal drama. The final nail in her professional coffin came when building security caught her attempting to access Cameron's computer and email account using passwords she'd observed him entering during late-night work sessions, apparently searching for evidence of his communications with other women and trying to delete messages from potential romantic rivals including his ex-wife and the wealthy client's daughter. She was ultimately fired for creating a hostile work environment, unprofessional conduct, invasion of privacy, violation of company computer policies, and what HR diplomatically termed behavior incompatible with workplace standards. With her termination happening on a Friday afternoon in a humiliating escort from the building scenario that became office gossip material for months afterward, forcing her to move back to her parents' house in Tucson at age 26 with nothing but debt and a reputation for unstable behavior that would follow her throughout Phoenix's professional event planning community. I discovered that life without Madison's constant drama and financial drain was remarkably peaceful in ways I hadn't even realized I'd been missing during our increasingly toxic final year together, when every day had felt like walking through an emotional minefield where the wrong word or gesture could trigger hours of conflict and manipulation. Without her monthly emergencies that always seemed to conveniently coincide with new product launches at her favorite stores or sudden necessities that required my immediate financial assistance, my savings account began flourishing for the first time since we'd started living together, and I found myself actually excited to check my bank balance instead of dreading the latest Venmo request or discovering mysterious charges on the credit card I'd given her for emergencies only. I started rock climbing lessons at a gym in Tempe, something Madison had always dismissed as too dangerous and pointless whenever I'd mentioned wanting to try it, claiming she didn't want to date someone who might get injured doing unnecessary extreme sports that would interfere with our social calendar and her carefully curated image of us as a stable, conventional couple suitable for her professional networking events. The climbing community turned out to be exactly what I needed: adventurous, financially responsible people who appreciated planning and preparation, who understood that good equipment and careful route planning weren't signs of being overly cautious but evidence of intelligence and respect for both the activity and the safety of your climbing partners. These were people who worked hard during the week and pursued meaningful challenges on weekends, who saved money for quality gear and epic climbing trips rather than spending impulsively on status symbols and social media content. Through my therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, whom I'd started seeing to process the emotional manipulation and gaslighting I'd experienced without even fully recognizing it at the time, I began to realize how much exhausting emotional labor I'd been doing throughout our relationship, constantly managing Madison's moods and subsidizing not just her lifestyle but her entire emotional stability and self-worth. I'd been walking on eggshells for months, carefully monitoring her reactions to everything from my career decisions to my family visits, always ready to apologize or adjust my behavior to prevent one of her dramatic outbursts about feeling unsupported or misunderstood whenever reality didn't match her expectations. Dr. Rodriguez helped me understand that healthy relationships don't require one person to constantly sacrifice their own needs, interests, and emotional well-being to maintain peace, and that Madison's pattern of creating crises and then expecting me to solve them while she took credit for any positive outcomes was a classic manipulation tactic designed to maintain control and emotional dependency. My social life expanded dramatically as I reconnected with college friends I'd gradually lost touch with during the Madison years, when she'd always found subtle reasons why she couldn't attend their gatherings or why their activities weren't sophisticated enough for her newly elevated standards and professional image requirements. My buddy Marcus, who worked in tech and had always been politely distant around Madison after she'd made some particularly condescending comments about his girlfriend's career as a public school teacher, was genuinely excited to have me back in the group and admitted he'd been worried about how isolated and different I'd become during my relationship. At the climbing gym, I met Harper, a nurse practitioner who owned her own small medical practice specializing in preventive care and had built exactly the kind of independent, purposeful life that I respected and wanted to be part of building with someone who shared similar values. Harper was everything Madison wasn't: financially independent by choice and hard work, intellectually curious about the world beyond social media and material possessions, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions rather than just waiting for her turn to talk about herself or complain about her latest workplace drama or perceived slight from friends and colleagues. Madison's attempts to regain control escalated to behavior that bordered on stalking and demonstrated just how desperate she'd become to maintain some kind of influence over my life and emotional state, revealing the depth of her entitlement and inability to accept that actions have permanent consequences. She hired a private investigator to track my new routines and document my daily activities, apparently convinced that understanding my schedule would give her opportunities to stage accidental encounters that would force me back into her orbit and make me realize how much I supposedly missed our relationship and needed her presence in my life. The PI, a guy named Rodriguez who later became an unexpected source of entertainment when he called to warn me about Madison's increasingly unhinged requests and concerning behavior, told me she'd asked him to document my activities, photograph any women I was seen with, and provide detailed written reports about my apparent happiness level based on his professional observations of my body language, social interactions, and general demeanor during various daily activities. She showed up at my office building during lunch hours wearing different disguises that were almost comically obvious and poorly executed, oversized sunglasses and baseball caps that made her look more conspicuous rather than hidden, wigs in completely unnatural colors that didn't match her skin tone, and even a fake pregnancy belly one particularly desperate afternoon when she apparently thought looking vulnerable and maternal would trigger my protective instincts and make me approach her. With concern and curiosity, my colleagues started pointing out and making jokes about the crazy stalker lady who kept lurking in the lobby and pacing around the building's entrance, completely unaware that she was my ex-girlfriend who had once criticized my job as boring and beneath her professional ambitions and social aspirations. She began sending expensive gifts to my workplace with increasingly desperate handwritten notes about needing to have adult conversations and deserving second chances to prove how much I've grown and changed. Packages that included everything from designer cologne to gourmet food baskets and even a high-end coffee maker with cards that alternated between apologetic and manipulative, sometimes managing to be both within the same rambling message. When she discovered my relationship with Harper through her elaborate spy network of mutual friends, social media monitoring, and probably information from that private investigator, she escalated her campaign to include contacting my family members with completely fabricated stories about my supposed mental breakdown and urgent need for professional intervention. She called my parents multiple times claiming I was having a psychological crisis and making dangerous, impulsive decisions that were completely out of character, insisting that she was deeply concerned about my welfare and thought they should consider staging some kind of family intervention to help me see reason and return to the stable, healthy relationship we'd supposedly built together over 4 years. My mom, who had always been politely skeptical of Madison's dramatic tendencies, materialistic priorities, and need to be the center of attention at every family gathering, listened patiently to these calls before calmly informing Madison that I seemed happier, more relaxed, and more like my authentic self than I'd been in years, and that perhaps Madison should focus her energy on addressing her own problems rather than trying to create new problems for everyone else. The final manipulation attempt involved posting increasingly dark and concerning content on her social media accounts about feeling completely abandoned by everyone who claimed to care, and not seeing the point in continuing when the people you love most can discard you so easily without any consideration for what you meant to them. Obvious emotional blackmail designed to make me feel guilty and personally responsible for her mental state and well-being. Instead of falling for the manipulation or rushing to rescue her like she clearly expected based on my previous patterns of caretaking and problem-solving, I took careful screenshots of her posts and called both her parents and sister directly to report my genuine concerns about her mental health, providing them with detailed documentation of her concerning behavior and strongly suggesting they encourage her to seek immediate professional help and counseling support. At their mutual friend's wedding 10 months later, Madison appeared with an obvious hired escort pretending to be her successful real estate developer fiancé, complete with a rental tuxedo that didn't fit properly and rehearsed business talking points that sounded like he'd memorized them from a LinkedIn profile rather than lived them through actual experience. The guy, who introduced himself as Derek, claimed to own multiple properties across Arizona and New Mexico, but when I casually asked him about specific neighborhoods in Phoenix that any legitimate developer would know intimately, his answers were vague and clearly fabricated, filled with generic real estate terminology that revealed he had no actual knowledge of the local market or development process. Madison spent the entire cocktail hour parading him around like a trophy, making sure everyone could see her engagement ring, which was obviously cubic zirconia but being presented as a substantial diamond, and loudly discussing their upcoming honeymoon to Europe and plans to build their dream house in Paradise Valley, details that became increasingly elaborate and implausible as the evening progressed. When I overheard her telling our friend Sarah about Derek's international business connections and upcoming IPO, I realized she'd created an entire fictional narrative around this relationship, probably believing her own lies at this point or at least committed to maintaining the charade until it served its purpose. The desperation became apparent during the reception when Derek kept checking his phone and seemed eager to leave, clearly uncomfortable with the extended performance he'd been hired for, while Madison became increasingly frantic about keeping his attention and making sure he stayed in character throughout the evening. When she excused herself to use the restroom, Derek immediately approached the bar and started complaining to the bartender about crazy clients who expect too much for their money, completely unaware that several people could overhear his comments about the psycho chick who'd hired him to play her boyfriend for the night. The breaking point came when I accidentally encountered Madison alone in the hallway outside the restrooms, where she immediately dropped the happy facade and broke down completely, admitting through tears that Derek was indeed a hired actor and that she'd been monitoring my life obsessively through fake social media accounts and reports from mutual friends who felt sorry for her situation. "I know how pathetic this looks," she said, mascara running down her cheeks as she gestured toward the reception where her fake fiancé was probably hitting on bridesmaids, "but I couldn't let everyone see how completely my life fell apart after you disappeared, couldn't let them know that losing you destroyed everything I thought I was building toward." She begged for another chance with the kind of raw desperation that would have broken my heart a year earlier, claiming her exploration had been a massive mistake and that Cameron had manipulated her into throwing away the only real relationship she'd ever had, insisting that everything she'd discovered about herself since then had proven that I was the only person who'd ever truly understood and valued her authentic self. When I gently but firmly told her that I was genuinely happy with Harper and had no interest in revisiting our past, she became angry and accused me of being vindictive and cruel, unable to understand that my contentment wasn't about punishing her but about finally finding someone who appreciated the same things I did and wanted to build something together rather than just taking what I could provide while shopping for better options. Harper, who had been watching this interaction from a respectful distance, approached with remarkable composure and security, even offering Madison genuine sympathy without feeling threatened or defensive, telling her that she hoped Madison would find the happiness and stability she was clearly seeking but that it needed to come from within rather than from trying to reclaim relationships that had ended for legitimate reasons. The encounter solidified for me the dramatic difference between someone who values you as a person versus someone who sees you as a backup plan while pursuing other options, and watching Madison's desperate performance contrasted with Harper's quiet confidence made me grateful that Madison's betrayal had freed me to find someone who actually deserved the kind of committed partnership I wanted to build.